Today we'll be talking about the voltage divider rule. Everything is timestamped in the formulas and additional info is linked in the description. Time is money, so let's get stuck into it. Righto, let's start with a nice simple series circuit. So what we have here is, let's say, a car battery sitting at 13 volts and connected in series are two resistors of 60 ohms and 40 ohms. What we know. So we know it goes from 13 volts here to 0 volts here. We know this bad boy is 60 ohms and this sucker is 40 ohms. What we don't know. We don't know the current and we don't know the voltage out here or here. So to start, what we can do, because this is a series circuit, is we can add the resistors together, which gives us an equivalent resistance, Req. So in series, Req is equal to R1 plus R2 plus R3 and so on. We can then substitute Req for R in Ohm's law to give us a current. So V equals IR can be rearranged to I equals V over Req, which in our case is 13 volts over 100 ohms and gives us 0.13 amps. So now we know we have a current of 0.13 amps, we can substitute that in for I and use V1 equals I times R1, which gives us 7.8 volts. And we can do the same for V2. V2 equals I times R2, which gives us 5.2 volts out from here to here. Now what we can do, just to double check our answers are right, we can go V1 plus V2 equals V total. So 7.8 volts plus 5.2 volts gives us 13 volts, which checks out. Another way of doing all this is to use the voltage divider rule. That is, V out equals V in times R2 over R1 plus R2. So in our case, that's 12 volts times 40 ohms over 60 ohms plus 40 ohms. Punch that into your calculator and that gives you 5.2 volts. Same answer as before. So same question, but let's say we add a little 20 ohm resistor here. That makes this parallel. So same as before, you want to start with your equivalent resistance, put that into your voltage divider formula, and you get your voltage out. To get the equivalent resistance in a parallel circuit, you use the formula 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2 plus 1 over R3 and so on, all to the power of negative 1. So here it would be 1 over 40 plus 1 over 20, all to the power of negative 1, which gives us R2 EQ of 13.33 ohms. Now we have to remember that this R2 EQ is just the equivalent of having one resistor in series rather than two in parallel. So now we have the equivalent of two resistors series circuit, exactly the same as in example 1. But now R1 is 60 ohms and R2 is 13.33 ohms. Now that we have simplified it, we can slap that into our voltage divider formula. So V in is 13 volts times an R2 of 13.33 ohms over 60 ohms plus 13.33 ohms. This gives us a V out of 2.36 volts. So V3 is 2.36 volts, and because V2 is in parallel, it's the same as V3. Now we can rearrange the formula from example 1 to give us V1 of 10.64 volts. And there you have it. That's the voltage divider rule.